So, afternoon, everybody. I'm Jonathan Stevens, Regional Director of Finance for the Northwest. I'm going to sort of chair this session this afternoon. I think you should also have an agenda. So we'll go over what the sponsorship programme is, the role as a sponsor. I'll give a personal perspective. I've also got Natasha Monroe, who I sponsor, and so is my sponsee, who can talk about her experience on this programme over the last couple of years. And then we've got another perspective from Kim Silver as well later on in the agenda. Important as well that we have Q&A, so I don't want it just to be you all sit here and get bored by me talking all the time. So if you do have questions, happy to take them as we go along and at the end as well. So do usually put the hand up button, and if Megan and Grace, you could just watch out for comments, etc., and shout out as we go along if someone wants to chip in. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to flip to the next slide? So the sponsorship program. So the sponsorship program started probably just over 2 years ago now, and it was a specific program aimed at getting support in for our underrepresented populations in our workforce. Now that's not necessarily underrepresentation throughout all grades, but in particular with the objective of increasing representation at our leadership positions, so Director of Finance, Deputy for that matter. And you only have to sort of attend a national Directors of Finance meeting and look around the room, and there's lots of sort of white, middle-aged folks like myself, and not, less in terms of women, and certainly not represented in terms of, Black, Asian, ethnic minority groups. Not any, many in terms of disability, a lot more to do on gender, and also the LGBTQ plus community. So it was specifically set up to support individuals to sort of progress their career and meet their career aspirations. When it first was set up, it was targeted towards bands 8A and above, which we, on reflection, we immediately said, well, actually, that's creating a glass ceiling in itself, because, if you look at the spread across grades, that meant there's an awful lot of people then couldn't get on the programme and actually support them to progress beyond band 8A upwards. So now it's open to all grades, and someone who sort of aspires to progress in their finance career, whether it's a band 5 wants to become a band 6, or a band 7 wants to become a Director of Finance, that will be dependent on the individuals. But clearly what we need to do is make sure we've got a pipeline of representation across our workforce, so ultimately as we progress we'll see that filtering through into our most senior positions in the finance community across the country. So as I said, there's the sort of the groups that we're tackling. And the other thing is that these sort of people have had sort of 2 to 3 years experience in the NHS, mainly to sort of they've got some understanding of where they are in their job. They understand the NHS and have got some sense of what they think their next step needs to be, sort of thing. Do you want to just flip on a slide? So in terms of the role of a sponsor, when this programme first was developed, I think there were about 2 pieces of paper and not much in the way of what to do thereafter. So it's pretty much sponsee says, I would like to join, I put your hand up as a sponsor and off you go, sort of thing. So we have sort of developed the supporting material both for sponsees and sponsors over the last couple of years, reflecting on experiences from the likes of myself and other sponsees and sponsors. The sponsees in particular have really provided a lot more material and feedback on how we should run the programme and how the roles play out, and that's sort of been reflected in the sort of supporting documentation that's behind this programme. For me, and I'll talk about the role in a minute, I think this is one of the sort of important strands we've got to get to grips with. I do think that if we have a vibrant community of sponsees, not only hopefully we're supporting them to achieve their ambitions, but in a sort of 360 sort of feedback, sort of reverse mentoring sort of way, they can really help influence how we develop some of our training and development approaches nationally and regionally and sort of a more local level. And in fact, the number of sponsees now are setting up their own networks. There's a sponsee network in the Northwest, one in London, and there's also a national sponsee network as well. So they're not only sort of creating their own networks to support each other and talk about opportunities at that level, they're also influencing how we develop some of the national policy on training and development and stuff like that. So, I think this is a really important thing. And we've sort of moved from sort of a handful of sponsees across the country. We got reasonable response of people wanting to be sponsors. To currently, we've got 105 nationally now, but the distribution is not consistent across the patch. So, for example, in the Northwest, we now have 42. In London, we've got 32. But if we was to look at the Midlands, I think West Midlands 4, Midlands 2, so 6 in total. But given the size of the patch, you would expect be more people coming forward for this particular programme. And similarly, in other patches around the country, they're very, very small numbers. So good it's grown, but really what we want to see is more representation across the regions, so everyone's getting a chance to get involved with this and hopefully benefit from it. And in fact, the number of the sponsees that I know that joined the programme 2 years ago, and including 2 people I sponsor, have actually gone on to get promotions, and others I know have gone on to get secondments, to get more experience, etc. So, it has proved to be, a practical experience in that they've gone on to achieve certain things. Also, when Natasha talks, what I've seen in a number of the sponsees, that these aren't people I sponsor either, how they've gained in confidence because of what they've got involved in, and how they've got sort of clearer vision of what they want to do in terms of next steps and the sort of journey to get there, sort of thing. So I do think this is a really important vehicle for the sort of wider initiative of improving diversity at our most senior levels across NHS finance, and not just finance, in procurement, informatics, and other fields of the areas that we're responsible for. So in terms of the role of the sponsor, it is an active role, so it's not like a mentor where you sort of might meet up with someone every 3 months, have a chat, bit of advice, and then sort of cheerio. So it's important that if you're going to take on the role of a sponsor, that you're committed to supporting the individual and helping them sort of progress in terms of their next steps. So Natasha and I, at the very outset, agreed that we would meet regularly. We meet once a month as a minimum, more frequently, and then there's always an open door for Natasha to ring me or seek advice, which she does do, and the same with Tabitha, the other person I sponsor. So it's important you have a set of regular sessions. Also, the role of the sponsor and things I've done is putting in touch your sponsee with other senior leaders. So, for example, opening opportunities for shadowing, or days out in an organisation that we don't really want to know more about, so they get more exposure to the sorts of job opportunities or career direction that they're thinking about. Shadowing, attending senior meetings, for example, joining a board meeting, or attending a senior finance session, or other leadership meetings. So that's sort of exposure to stuff like that. Also, one of the things we're trying to get off the ground now, we've got more sponsees, because a common issue that's raised by sponsees is often they're going for jobs, and it's often from one sector to another, and they come up with you were really fantastic at the interview, but I've given it Jonathan because he's already working in the acute sector or commissioning or whatever it might be. So now we've got a larger group of sponsees. What we're thinking about now is you could get into arrangements. We have a sort of a swap, So sponsee A wants to get experience in terms of the sector that sponsee B is, and likewise, and with the support of the sponsors, you could go do with short to medium term secondments, and that means the employer on both sides doesn't lose out and they're getting someone that's being supported. So that hopefully will create an opportunity to make a more structured approach to secondments for our sponsees and others for that matter, as we now got a greater number of those individuals. Also, part of the role of a sponsor is to sort of observe the sponsee in action, as it were, find out how their placement, shadowing, etc. went on, provide them constructive feedback and support. One of the things I've done with the people I've sponsored is often, depending where people are in their career path, some are very clear on the next steps. Other individuals are not quite sure and want to sort of, you need to sort of tease out of them, what is it they're looking for in terms of a career path. So it's helping them think about that, helping them identify the skills that they need to develop in order to progress there. That's then also influences, where you might place people in terms of getting experience, shadowing, etc., etc. So that they sort of get a clearer indication of where they want to go next. And then therefore supporting their sort of personal development reviews and next steps. And also, advising them on development opportunities. So, spotting opportunities and letting them know about it. If they find opportunities for themselves, advising on whether you think that's, the next best opportunity for them, given, the discussions that you've had as a couple, as it were. And sort of, advising on career choices and whatever career choices, the sorts of experience you might need in the sort of CV portfolio in order to get that. And act as a real advocate for the individual. So really, getting them out there, getting them their face a bit known a bit more, and also identifying some stretch experience that will benefit their development. So it's quite an active role, so it's not a passive one, but there's responsibilities on both sides. So there's the role of the sponsor, but there's also the expectation on the sponsee. So always leaving sessions with actions on both sides is important in this relationship. So it achieves what it needs to achieve, sort of thing. I'll just pause the rest there. Is there any questions before we move on? Nope. Do you want to flick on, maybe? In terms of a sponsee, clearly that's not a passive role either, so they don't turn up and sort of expect the sponsor to sort of do everything for them. It's not like a golden ticket, there's obligations on both sides. So important now, if you agree things with your sponsee, that the sponsee also delivers on what their side of the bargain, as it were. Important that the sponsee, takes on new opportunities and says yes to those, because that's part of development in terms of, their stretch and what they need to get experience of, to get whatever next steps, you've agreed with is what they're aiming for. And they should drive the sponsorship relationship as well. So they should have an active role of, seeking support, shaping the conversations, describing, what they would like to do, seeking support, and whether it's going in for job interviews or CVs or advice and that sort of thing. And also identifying opportunities for themselves and then engaging with you about how you might help them access those opportunities. So that, it's important that the sponsee has a clear description of what aims and objectives they want to get from the program, so it's not just a loose conversation and relationship that sort of drifts and sort of withers on the vine without any outputs or objectives being achieved. So I think it's important that the sponsor has a clear set of objectives of what they want to get from this program. The same for the sponsor, so you're both aligned in delivering on that. And also what I've found useful from the sponsees in this regard is how much more you learn about some of our individuals, not only themselves, but some of the issues in terms of EDI. So it's been very helpful for me. I also chair a North Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Working Group, and a lot of my engagement with Natasha and other sponsees has really helped shape some of the work programs and practical things we're doing in the North to address EDI. So again, you get a lot out of it as a sponsor as well as a sponsee. Just seeing people flourish, gaining confidence, and ultimately, achieve their next goal at some point is very rewarding as a sponsor. And well, it certainly is for me, and that's certainly why I do it. Want to flick on, Megan? So I think I've talked about the benefits there. So you get an insight into different people's roles and jobs and what makes them tick. You get a different insight into the different types of individuals that make up our workforce that ultimately is valuable, as I've described. But ultimately, I think you're making a positive impact and change, and ultimately, I hope that this will lead to over time, better representation at CFO, DOF level, and probably deputy level as well, given, if you look at the pipeline, and actually seeing someone flourish, learn and achieve their particular ambitions, whether they not all have to be lofty, it's not, the expectation here isn't everyone wants to be director of finance, but if they progress to the next step that they want to progress on and that support help them get there, that's a really, excellent and good thing. Also, I found you start to then get at least a wider list of, talent within the NHS. So, often now when, as jobs come out to me, I'm now circulating that to the list of sponsees that I'm now aware of, and I meet quite a few of them in these surgeries. We've had sponsee conference and things like that. So you start to get a list of other individuals that are growing and developing that are available for jobs that you may be putting out to the market. So that's what I think the tangible benefits are from being a sponsor, as well as the sort of personal benefit you get from it. So in terms of sign up, you can see on there the slide. You sort of log on onto the Future Focus Finance and send an email there to say you'd officially like to be a sponsor for your organisation and the region. I sponsor someone. Natasha's in London, Tabitha's in the Northwest, so they don't have to be geographically local to you. It depends on who it is, the sort of career path, and what's practical in that relationship. Clearly, as we've all moved to working on teams to a lesser degree, that makes the arrangement a lot more flexible. So that's one thing to consider when you're offering to be a sponsor. It can be someone in your organisation, it can be somebody outside your organisation. It's what works for you and the sponsee ultimately. If you have a sponsee in mind, also, you can sort of say, I want to be a sponsor, and I've got somebody who wants to be a sponsee, and put yourself forward and off you go, sort of thing. Also, at FFF and regionally, we can sort of match people up. So if you're really keen to be a sponsor, but you haven't got sponsee identified, we can sort that out and get someone aligned to you for you to support. So that's not an issue. Next slide. Is that the end? So that's me sort of rattling through for 20 minutes on sort of the role of the sponsor. Natasha, do you want to sort of come in and do a little bit about your experience as a sponsee, given Natasha's been on this for sort of just over 2 years now, isn't it, Natasha? So Natasha, I think, was one of the very first sponsees when this was first kicked off nationally.
Hi everyone, I'm Natasha Monroe. I'm a senior finance manager with NHSEI London region, and I think Jonathan's probably touched on quite a lot of our relationship over the 2 years and what I've been able to do during that 2 years. So I'd probably just talk about the type of person who would be interested as a sponsee in the program, and what you potentially might be experiencing with your sponsee as a sponsor. Some of what I've been doing and the experiences I've had over the 2 years. So I joined 2 years ago, as Jonathan has said. and I was sort of at the point where I was starting to think about what my next steps could be and should be in terms of career progression and what I would need to do in order to progress, whether it's finding out the type of skills I might be lacking or the types of roles that I wasn't aware of. So that was sort of my starting point in terms of joining the program. Um, I looked on the FFF website, which is probably where most sponsees will go to see whether there were any programs, not necessarily just sponsorship, but whether there were any development programs and leadership programs. And that's how I came across the FFF program. I contacted the FFF team to ask whether there were any sponsors in my organization. And a few weeks later, I then had an email from the PA of our then CFO to let me know that there was a potential sponsor in the organization, which was Jonathan, and that they wanted to set up a meeting, an initial meeting for us to get to know each other. I didn't know Jonathan. Because, as I said, he's in the Northwest, I'm in London. Jonathan didn't know who I was. So that was the first time we'd ever meet. It wasn't face to face either, so it was a virtual meeting. And it was set for an hour as an introduction. And during that hour, I talked about my own career. Jonathan did the same. I talked about why I thought this would be a good program for me to join and why I thought it would be a good idea for me to have a sponsor. Jonathan also said why he thought it would be a good program from a sponsor's perspective, why he wanted to join the program. We talked about some of the challenges that I experienced during my career, or if I had any challenges that I was aware of um, during my career. And I think very quickly we sort of realized that yes, we wanted to go ahead and be sponsee and sponsor, and this will vary across different relationships. Some sponsees and sponsors might feel after the first meeting, well, this is not the right pairing for us. I think we need to find someone else. And it might even take a few meetings for you to come to the realization that perhaps this is not the right pairing for us. But Jonathan and I agreed that we would go ahead and see what we could do. So we agreed that, as Jonathan, we agreed that we would meet every month initially because it was new. We would meet for an hour. Both of us would have actions that we would take from each meeting, but we wouldn't necessarily keep in contact every meeting. We would have conversation, whether it's on the phone or through emails, just to keep in contact as well and to see how we were getting along in terms of the actions that we had to take away. So Jonathan, some of the questions Jonathan asked me was, in terms of my career progression, what was I thinking? Was I thinking about career progression in my current organization? Is that where my head was? Is that where what I'm thinking about? And I said, yes, that's actually what I was thinking. I was thinking how I can progress within my own career. And Jonathan challenged me in that, why are you only thinking about your own career when there are so many other organizations within the NHS, whether it's a trust, a role within a trust or within a CCG or another type of NHS organization. And that was sort of like, oh, actually, I've not thought of that. And I think a sponsor is there to also challenge the sponsee in their thinking, because I went in with a very set, oh yes, this is what I want to progress in within my organization, but I don't necessarily know how to do that. And I think the sponsor's role is also there to challenge the sponsees on their own views and their own thinking. So in order to get that conversation going and that thinking going, Jonathan actually facilitated me by linking me into some CFOs and trusts in organizations. So he initially introduced me to them, and then I sort of introduced me to them and also told them about the program itself and why I wanted to shadow them or I wanted to attend certain meetings with them. So that was the introduction from the sponsor side. I then took over in terms of the technicalities of actually setting up the meetings and setting up the shadowing days, etc. For most of the people I shadowed, I had an initial call with them to talk about why I wanted to shadow them and why I wanted to attend, for example, a trust board meeting, why I thought I could gain or learn from attending a trust board meeting. So that was sort of a call that I had with them. And I shadowed, like I said, both trusts and CCGs. I shadowed them. For some of them, I shadowed them for a few days, and some of them I only shadowed them on one day. So the shadowing involved actually me attending their meetings. But also, fortunately, there were times when, for whatever reason, they had quite a lot of time where they didn't actually have any meetings. So I had the opportunity to talk to them on a one-to-one basis to actually hear about their own careers, and what they've experienced, and some of the challenges they face in order to get to where they are, and also some of how I should be thinking in terms of how I want my career to progress. So that was really good in terms of Jonathan facilitating all of that. Some of the things Jonathan helped me with was also in my thinking about progressing, what were the skills gaps that I've identified, but also potentially what's been identified when I've gone for interviews, and the feedback that I've had when I've not been offered a role. How can I fill those gaps? So that's when the conversations around secondments and swaps potentially could help me with that. So my current role is actually a secondment into the London region. So that's helped quite a lot. So Jonathan's helped me with when I've applied for roles, he's actually gone through the job spec with me to highlight some of the areas that I should be highlighting when I'm doing my applications, as well as when I am going for the interview, what the specific areas were that I should be highlighting in the interview. So like I said, it's a very active role, as Jonathan has said, for both the sponsee and sponsor. So it's not that the sponsor sets up everything for you and you just go wherever the sponsor tells you to. It is a continuous dialogue. And I think when I started the program, I had an idea of what I wanted to gain from it, but it developed a lot and significantly during the 2 years. And that was because Jonathan was pushing me to do more and to be more active and to think more broadly. So in terms of the sponsor, that is really important. So probably about, I don't know, 6 or 8 months into the program, I contacted the FFF team to find out whether there were any other sponsees on the program, so that we could form a network, so we could learn from each other, and also share some of the experiences that we've had, where I could say, well, actually, I've gone for a shadowing day within a trust. Some of the other sponsees have said, well, actually, I've not even thought of that. I didn't know I could use the sponsorship in that way. So we set the network up about probably 18 months, maybe a bit less than that. And initially we had about 5 to 10 people in the network. The network itself has grown to about 40 people, and I know there are more sponsees on the program as well, but there's about 40 people on the national network. We've also now have regional networks as well, and they are led by sponsees from the national group. Like Jonathan said, representation across England. I think there's a heavy representation in the Northwest and then in London as well. So some of the other areas are not currently being served. So there's, I think, maybe 3 sponsees, I think, in the Midlands, I think, Kim. It might have grown now, but representation across the country is not as good as it could be. And I know there are quite a few sponsors who signed up. So there's some work that we need to do in there. But in terms of the actual network, I think we've grown and we've learned a lot from each other, and we've contributed as a network. When we initially started, like Jonathan said, there was a one pager of telling us what the program was. So the network and the sponsees has actually contributed to a sponsorship workbook, where we set out what sponsees can expect in the first meeting, how to approach a potential sponsor, if you have someone specific in mind, how to approach the FFF team, what your meetings, the duration of your meetings, what you can talk about in your meetings. So we actually have a sponsorship workbook that can be used by both sponsees and sponsors. Like Jonathan said, some of the not unexpected, but some of the additional benefits of the program, and it's not just for myself, but I'm sure it's for other sponsees as well, is the confidence that all of us have gained, because I wouldn't necessarily in my day-to-day job be asked to chair a meeting or chair a network, which I do. So we meet every 3 months, and the same for other sponsees, especially the ones who are leading regionally. They wouldn't necessarily be asked to do that. So in terms of confidence, sponsees will say, yes, definitely our confidence have increased because of the exposure we've had, because of the visibility that the program has given us, because there's quite a few sponsees who've been asked to speak at HFMA or FSD at various conferences. So that's sort of the additional that we've gained from the program, apart from some of us who have moved on to new roles. And I think probably the first cohort, all of us have moved on to new roles. And I think that was about 5 or 6 of us, so all of us have moved on to new roles who initially started the program. So I know Kim's going to talk a bit more about her personal perspective, but I just thought I'd sort of give you an idea of what you can expect as a sponsor if someone were to approach you, and how initially your relationship could be, and what you can both learn from each other going forward.
Thank you, Natasha. That was excellent. Any questions from anyone? Charlotte?
Hi, I'm from East Lancashire Hospitals. I just want to say, Natasha, that was really inspiring. That was really good to hear, and I think that's a really good example to attract other sponsees to this course. That sounded really good, and the confidence that you've got from that. I did notice that you must have to wear a check shirt. Because you're both wearing a check shirt for your sponsor.
I didn't realise that. Yeah,
I didn't realise that.
See how we've sort of grown together. We have the same wardrobe.
No, and I think the other bit I found interesting was for a sponsor to the reverse mentoring, that we gain something from it as well. And I suppose sometimes you lose touch with things, so I just thought it was a really good example. So thank you, Natasha.
And that reverse mentoring is important because, when we're talking about equality, diversity, inclusion, we all do our very best to think we understand how people feel from different backgrounds and groups. But it's no truer than getting the message from those individuals themselves, isn't it? And I mean that is genuinely helping us develop the program, helping me in the North think about how we approach training and development and inclusivity. So that's what I really get that out, as well as seeing, it's wonderful how Natasha's grown and got a promotion. And you're right, she's sharing a national HFMA meeting, had 600 people on the call, which I think 2 years ago, if she said, "Can you do that tomorrow?" she probably would have got in the car and driven home. The other thing we also have sort of thought about, Charlotte and others, is that we probably do need to come up with some sort of KPI. So as well as sort of talking it like we are, we're sort of saying, here's some evidence, if you like, that it's making a difference. So one of it is clearly people have got the next step they wanted. As I said, it's not a golden ticket, so it doesn't mean that you got your Willy Wonka ticket and next week you've got the best job you ever wanted, sort of thing. But we do need to measure that there is some success, and there's actually a meeting, might be next week or the week after, where a few of us as sponsors and sponsees are getting together to reflect on that and what might we start to describe. And one of them will be job progression, but there needs to be other things, because there's other things people are gaining from the program that Natasha's articulated.
I suppose the only other thing I was going to say, I suppose because of the pandemic and all the home working, I suppose it's much easier as well to catch up with people, isn't it? Rather than getting in the car and drive 20 miles or something. Yeah.
It's easier to shadow as well, So, Natasha did come up to Manchester in the old days when you could travel and go to places and that sort of thing. Yeah. Whereas now you could still join that board meeting or whatever by Teams, can't you? So in some respects, the technology has made it easier to folk to get involved in stuff that before it would have been a right hassle to set up, sort of thing. Absolutely. Any other questions before we move to Kim? Kevin?
Yeah, hi Natasha, very well done, really inspiring. Can I just ask, because it's quite a step up, isn't it, from what you were doing through the promotion to actually chairing 600 people, very well done. Is that part of an overall personal development plan, besides a sponsoring arrangement? And Jonathan, how much say or influence do you have in that?
I mean, Natasha's, because of the journey, Natasha and myself have sort of really put ourselves into the sponsorship program. So in some respects, we just asked Natasha and she didn't say no, sort of thing. But she was aware of the challenge. So Natasha's putting herself forward now I think Natasha really believes in the programme like I do and thinks it's important, but B, for her own personal development, and she enjoys it. She's meeting lots of other people. I mean, I'll let Natasha speak for herself, and then I'll answer the other bit of your question, Kevin. Natasha?
I don't think it was necessarily something that Jonathan and I talked about, where we said, well, actually, Natasha, I think you should be chairing certain meetings. It was more me thinking that actually I need to put myself completely into this program and actually push myself in order to expand my experience, because if I don't put myself forward to chair something, I will never get the opportunity, and I will never get the opportunity to prove that actually I can chair a meeting of and I think I'll say I started out small, because I started chairing our sponsee network first, and initially we were about 10, so that was sort of me dipping my toes in, and we moved on from there as the network has grown and as the program has gained more visibility. The FFF team have asked me to actually contribute to, HFMA, or contribute to a DEI conference that they would have had through FFF. So it was small steps. I can say it was probably small steps, but also me challenging myself and saying, well, actually, if I don't do it now, when will I ever have the opportunity? And this is part of the learning and also part of my development, in order to, when I do get to Deputy DOF, I will be able to chair. So it's me putting myself out there and learning as part of the program.
And I think as part of a sponsor, Kevin, is talking to your sponsor about, getting exposure to those things and thinking about ways of just getting your face known, isn't it? We all know that. They're getting your face known outside of your team and your small job. Which is so, when someone mentions Natasha now, there's quite a few more people know who Natasha is than previously. And there's other, there's Aisha and Alice in the Northwest who, work alongside Natasha in supporting this nationally, and they similarly now. Aisha was on the Alice was on the. We'd had a sponsorship conference that was over 100 people, and she was on there being interviewed as part of our role as a sponsor, and she was very good, wasn't she, Natasha? Similarly, confident and saying how she'd sort of grown. Because I think what you're doing is to get exposing these individuals to what they could be, an opportunity, and getting involved. And we all know it's like in our own careers. There's just like that exposure just helps a little bit, doesn't it? Sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And I do say this is, for me, the sponsorship program is finding people that may not be the most extrovert, may not be the go-getters, because to be honest, they tend to be go-getting anyway, don't they? But I've got loads of hidden talent that, with a bit of support and encouragement, could ultimately fulfill to be, director of finance or CFO, whatever they want to be. So that's how I feel about this program, with the ultimate objective that we've got to have better representation at our most senior levels. You look at the populations we serve in the Northwest, and we've got one director of finance from an ethnic background. That's ridiculous, isn't it? But I can't change that overnight, because if I go down to deputy level, it's probably the same profile. So we do need to start from sort of entry level through, as well as just making people supported. And anyway, so that's why it's specifically focused, because that's the ultimate objective, really. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
Conscious of time, Kim, do you want to do your personal perspective, please?
Yeah, that's fine. So I'm Kim De Silva. I'm the Head of Financial Management at the University Hospital of North Midlands. I joined the programme back in July. So I approached FFF similarly to Natasha. I'd kind of looked at the literature that was available, and I approached FFF. Natasha mentioned that there was very low numbers, and actually at the point where I approached FFF, there was no sponsor available for me. So they agreed that they would contact somebody within the STP to see if it would work. In the interim, I met with Natasha, and she was really helpful in kind of saying, outlining her experience to date and what she'd gained from the programme. So FFF kindly approached a DOF at the local mental health trust within our STP. And again, similarly to Natasha, we did that initial meeting. It was very much, this is what I wanted out of the programme, this is what she was hoping to gain from the programme. And we both talked through our background to date, and from there we agreed that this was going to work, and we agreed to meet going forward. We've since re-reviewed that, because actually my sponsor has got another role outside of the STP. But as Jonathan's mentioned, actually the technology and the systems that we've developed over the last 6 months in teams of teams and some of the networks we've built up, actually we've decided that we are going to continue this. So I think we did reflect whether to have somebody advocate for me within the STP would be better. But we've both agreed that for now we'll continue despite her moving on to the East Midlands region. So yeah, we had that initial meeting. It was quite informal, and we agreed that we'd go from there. So we meet on a monthly basis. I think for me, my experience is probably a little bit different to Natasha, because I think the first 8 months of the programme for me have felt more like mentoring. So when I started on the programme, I was actually appointed into a new post. And actually, I didn't really feel like it was an appropriate time for me to start perhaps on sponsorship, looking for development and secondment opportunities. So actually, my sponsor has been slightly different, I think, for the first 8 months, in that she's been more of a mentor to me. And so I've used her as a sounding board. She's talked me through when she was in a similar post. So I think now we're at a point now where I feel a bit more embedded in my post, and we're starting to move on. And I think our relationship is now starting to evolve very much to a sponsor and sponsee, as we set out at the start of the programme. And I think that's part of the advantage of this being a 2-year programme. And I think Natasha and Jonathan have been on this for longer than 2 years. And I think that is the advantage, is that because there's no end date, where you come into the programme and you're perhaps at a different point, you don't feel kind of time barred and pressured to kind of progress through this. I think it's kind of, you can do it at your pace. So I think it has been really useful. I think in terms of the benefits to date, I'm starting to see some of those benefits from the programme that Natasha has clearly gained. So the West Midlands region is going to have its first sponsee meeting in a month, and I'm going to be chairing that. And again, that's something that I perhaps wouldn't have done, 6 months ago. And part of the reason I joined this programme is actually I've only ever worked at one UH&M. I've only ever worked at UH&M, and actually my peer network is quite small. I don't have a wider NHS network of people that I can call upon. And actually becoming involved in this programme, I feel like my network has grown exponentially over the last few months, in terms of, not only just having a sponsor, but it's having people like Natasha, Alice, and people that you can call on for, it might be a work question, it might be how is your sponsor doing this. I think having that network is just really, it's invaluable. In terms of other benefits I've had, like I said, it has very much been a mentor relationship so far. So I think it's having somebody that's a sounding board. For me, it's been really helpful to have someone that's external to the organisation. And I think what Lorraine's done is, over the last few months, as we're starting to edge into what I would call more of a sponsor-sponsee relationship, she's really starting to push me forward. So she sent me quite a few networking and development events on women in leadership that we've run across the STP. She's linked me in with some external peers that are at the same level. So they're also in head of financial management role at big acute trusts. So she's linked me in with them again. So I've got that network of people. And I think that's also helped move away from the mentor, because I've got somebody now that's in that same role, so that we don't spend the time that should be used for a sponsor-sponsee relationship isn't kind of work related now. It's very much about my development. And I think that's really helped. I think the other thing at the moment that she's encouraged me to do is, the post above me is vacant at the moment. And I think she's really encouraged me to take advantage of that and kind of really throw my name into the ring where there's meetings that I perhaps wouldn't traditionally sit in on. She's really encouraged me to, ask to be at those things. And, the trust I'm at have been really supportive. And, last week I was on a call with some of the non-exec directors going through the financial planning position, which is a big step up to where I perhaps was 8 months ago in a divisional role. So I think the trust have been really supportive of that as well. But I think, Lorraine has really been pushing me forward, and I think she gives me a different perspective on things, which has been so helpful being new into that post. And I think because I've gone from being in a divisional post to a more senior corporate post, I think having that has been particularly helpful as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Kim. And you're right, there's no like one size fits all in how the relationship works. Depends where you are in your journey and what makes best for you. And if it helps you, Kim, to get to that point and progress, that's that's fantastic, isn't it? And you're all at different points, aren't you, in terms of where you are in your careers. So open to questions now from folk on the call. Anything you want to ask any of us? we've answered all your questions. And there's a few hands gone up. Hi, Mark. Long time no see.
Hi, Jonathan. You well? It is
Yeah, not bad. You?
Far too long, yeah. I was just reflecting on what Kim had said there, really, and having worked in the Northwest and now in the West Midlands, I think the biggest difference I've seen is that networking is a really strong established networking in the Northwest.
Yeah.
And less so that maybe some of that's around geography. I don't know, but that seems to be driving for me the differential in the engagement in this program on a regional basis, and I just wonder how. Just reflections on that and how we address that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the geography is a bit of an excuse, to be honest. I think it's about leadership, isn't it, and about people saying this is important. The diversity agenda is very important in showing leadership, isn't it? So it takes a bit of, and to be fair, I've had to do a bit of hard graft and mithering myself, to get from the numbers we've got in the Northwest to where we are now. And using the likes of Natasha talking about the experiences from it has been quite powerful. But also saying, I've said to our patch, there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't have at least one sponsee per organisation. The size of the workforce, the sort of diversity in your workforce. There must be an individual that, with a bit of support, would really benefit from this. No, and I get in some teams there might be two people, and that's not, it's just not necessarily. But it's not exactly a hard thing to do this. It just needs a bit of drive and push. So for me, there isn't an excuse really. This has been open for 2 years, and if all of the the senior CFOs and DOFs in your patch, irrespective of what others are doing, said, come on, surely we can all identify someone that this will benefit. Just off you go, sort of thing. One of the things we're also trying to encourage in terms of sponsees is getting some from our lower grades, actually. So it's like more of a pipeline approach. Clearly, we want to have more representation in our senior levels, but we want everyone to feel like there's a vision and a journey, and then getting sponsors that are actually being sponsees. So, for example, it's probably more appropriate for, a band 5 wanting to become a band 6 to have a band 8 being the sponsor, because they've got more direct influence in those experiences, where in other cases it might need to be a CFO or a deputy or whatever it might be. So for me, everyone on the phone, if you've got a team, there's no reason why you come back and say, actually, Charlotte over here would sort of might be interested. Now, clearly, we don't want to force people on this. They've got to feel it's something they want to do. But if it's not for them, fine. If it's something you're interested in, good. I know. And if you had then, I don't know, if you've got 40 in the North, so you had 20, 30, whatever it might be in the Midlands, they create their own network. They're a valuable source then to you as a leadership team in terms of how you develop your training and development. They're a group of individuals that are there for opportunities as well, for recruitment, etc. So, and as well as a support network for themselves, and instead of getting other colleagues they can talk to outside their organisation. So I keep describing it. It could be quite a movement, the sponsee groups, both regionally and nationally, influencing how we think about EDI and the wider issues, as well as their development, their progression, etc., etc. So I think it's just for you to sort of you've got to want to do it though, because there's no point being a sponsor if it's just tick box. It's no point being a sponsee if it's well, I've got my name down for this. You've got to have some practical impact on this. But I just genuinely enjoy supporting people, but also for the wider objective of what this is all about. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm happy, as I said, because I tend to take a national approach on this too. If you want me to speak at anything or support, I'm happy to be anyone wants to speak to me about it. I'm happy to get involved if that will help in any way.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Charlotte?
Yeah, I think Kim answered the question I was going to ask actually, which was what do you see as the key difference between a mentor and a mentee? And how I'm picking it up, it is more about that personal development rather than, I think, Kim, you described it as the job, where I suppose as a mentor, you're in a mentee relationship, it's the job and a bit of personal development, but this is definitely about that person, isn't it, and how that person progresses. So I just checking I've understood that right, really.
Yeah, yeah. It's with an objective to achieve something, as
Mm.
opposed to, oh, this cropped up at work today, what do you think, sort of thing. That's an important part of it as well, but it's a much more objective with some sort of deliverable behind it. Now, for Kim, at that point, the deliverable was act as a mentor. Next step deliverable is, get exposure to this, that, and the other sort of thing. So as I said, it's horses for courses, as it were. Jonathan Webb.
Okay, thanks very much, and thanks very much for all three of you really for sort of sharing your experiences. It's been really fascinating to listen to. And the bit that you said, Jonathan, around the network, I think really resonates. I had the pleasure, to be honest, about 4 weeks ago of having a one-to-one with Alice from the Northwest to find out about what was happening in the Northwest, and it was really good. And there is something about just getting this program sort of talked about, and also it's commonplace, so we don't have to have sessions like this, because and the movement bit is, I think, really resonates. I just wondered, and it was going back to one of your opening points about how the fact that these sorts of programs are in some ways easy to deliver now we're all on Teams, because you can have that contact, from Pontefract to Truro or wherever it is. And I was just thinking about the sort of networks that we've got, though, because being honest, I know people in northeastern Yorkshire. I know a few people probably passing in the northwest. As soon as you get into the Midlands, etc., I know the geography, but I don't know the people. And some of that opening up of opportunities, I just wonder the extent to which it'd be almost better to get it within sort of a network where you've got the contacts, so you can sort of draw on those contacts and that network, really.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the sponsees, one of the things which links to this concept that I've been talking about, how we create like a swap program, because all of you that have been in NHS finance for years, like myself, you'll know it's been notoriously hard to get us a comment. And I remember I've been, well, I can't let Natasha go because I've got no one to fill a place. We need to move beyond that now, and this does create an opportunity. Whereas I don't have to worry so much about Natasha going, because I've got Jonathan coming the other way as part of this program, and you could make it for 2 months, 3 months, whatever's practical. The one way of getting over this barrier, and we've all been in there, well, I can't recruit such a body because they've not got that acute experience yet. Well, hang on a minute, so how we recruit and think and support needs to change a bit, I think, now going forward. And in terms of the wider networks, I mean, you could create sponsor networks, we've got the famous and joint networks. So we're having our first joint sponsor and sponsee, sort of a few of us talk about these sort of measures of success, but that could be widened out, because whilst it's written down the role of a sponsor, we're all sort of, and a sponsor, you're learning as you go along these things, aren't you, about how to make these things work, and etc. So we sort of learn as we've on this journey for the last 2 years, but very easy to set up networks, and I'm sure you have in the Midlands, there'll be the Midlands Director of Finance meeting that you may have on Teams, like we have every 2 weeks in the Northwest. You can access a lot of people to say this is important, and why don't you do this? But it does, even in the Northwest, it's taken constant nagging, telling people, and I know people are busy and COVID, but this is important, isn't it? And you can make too many excuses for these sort of things.
And that's actually something that the sponsee network is really pushing for, the secondments and swaps. So because there are certain regions where we've got a big enough group within the region. So for example, we might have 3 8As or 4 8Bs or whatever across trust and CCGs, where an 8A has put themselves forward and said, well, actually, I don't have any trust experience. Is there a way that we could do a swap, or potentially, not a full year secondment, perhaps 6 months secondment? Can that be facilitated so that within our group, we can do the swap? And Kim is actually, with a few of the other sponsees, she's actually developed a template where the sponsees will note down some of what they're currently doing in some of the experience areas rather, they are looking for, so that we can start facilitating that conversations within the sponsee group, but then also for the sponsees to take it to the wider FFF team as well as their sponsors, so we can see, well, actually, it would be really good for Kim to be paired with Alice, for example, so that there can be a swap facilitated between the two, so that Kim can gain trust experience from acute trust, or Alice can gain that trust experience from a mental health trust. So that's one key thing that we're definitely pushing forward in our regular catch-ups.
And the good thing for us in that is we get a wider group of individuals got mixed experiences, which is a benefit for us all, isn't it, as well as for them themselves. So yeah, we sort of need to think differently about these sorts of things than we have done in the past. Any other questions? So, if you want to be a sponsor, fantastic. And if you've got any influence of getting a sponsee in your organisation, I encourage you to do so. If they want to know more, they can speak to the sponsees. Natasha and others are always open to sort of explaining it on a one-to-one basis. They can speak to me. If you want sessions putting on for groups of staff about this, Grace and others on the line can sort of facilitate that with people on the programme to help explain and a bit more about this if that's needed. So yeah, go out there and spread the word.